they say treat each other as you would like to be treated, but also at the same time, you have to know how to treat others as they would like to be treated as well, right? So I think that has to apply equally in parallel. And that's the balancing act that's required to achieve peace. And not many think through this a lot because we're always insisting on what we think is right. And it's a shame, but at the end of the day, we're also only but humans. So the more people are aware of that, and I think self-awareness and that mindset is key in achieving peace. Because if you're aware of what other people will feel or are impacted, then you get to think about twice about what you would want to do.
The following is a long open conversation with Dong-Wonk, the Senior Director of the Career Development Office at the Asia School of Business. We got a chance to sit and talk about many topics, like how was life growing up in South Korea? How was his experience in the military, especially in the Air Force? What made him decide to study in the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy and Governance? And what he is doing right now in the APAC region? This is On the Lawn with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to contact the channel in the description below. And now with y'all, Dong-Wonk the W. Lee. Can you imagine that there has been a lot of holidays? I remember last Saturday was the Malaysia Day holiday.
Yeah.
And it's like, I mean, holiday on a Saturday. Isn't that something already? Well, I guess.
Only if you get an extension afterwards.
Yeah, that would be fun. I guess we can start.
Sure.
3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have TW. Thanks for doing this, man.
My pleasure, Fabian.
So, imagine that there has been a lot of things like people doing interviews, people trying to find a harvest setting in Tinden, and they may remind you. Other people will say, wait a second, I remember this guy, but from some different hat. So, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. So do you want me to begin way back or do you most recently?
Or we can begin, we can start from the beginning.
From the beginning, all right. I'll skip the part where I was born, but I grew up in pretty much different parts of the world. So I'm originally Korean, South Korean, and immediately, because of my father's studies, I lived in Taipei for a couple of years, and then I moved to Paris. And then after that, I moved to the United States and New York, New Jersey, and then went back home to Korea. And I grew up there until college, and I went to UT Austin for an exchange program, and that sort of opened my eyes to studying abroad. But I had to do my military service, so I decided to take on a unconventional path and serve a little bit more. So I took on the officer commission school opportunity and became an officer of the Air Force. And I served for 3 years and 4 months, and I was the defense minister's diplomatic aide. Which also brought me around the world a lot. I got a chance to go to DC a lot, and then Iraq, Kuwait, and that really took me to thinking of what I want to do when I grow up. So after finishing my service and leaving the Air Force, I decided to pursue my studies at the Kennedy School and in public policy, focusing on international security and peacekeeping. But as things happen in life, I had a change of mind, and I saw a lot of interesting opportunities sort of evolving in the corporate sustainability space. And at the time, the word ESG didn't exist. So it was more CSR, or corporate social responsibility, corporate citizenship, those are words that are out there. And then, of course, sustainability came, and finally, NDGs became an SDG. So a lot of evolution at the time. It was a very exciting time, and I wanted to take part in that. So I decided to jump into the private sector, looking to find ways to bring public value to society. And of course, I continued on in different industries. I was in telecommunications, I was in investment banking and financial services sector, and then later on, sort of again, I had another pivot and moved to a education content provider, and I served as their Asia Pacific regional director for business development and alliances and partnerships. So I worked with the Googles, the Intels, the Microsofts, the Samsungs to bring content to the platform. Had I started about 15 years later, I think I would have been in a much better business situation because pandemic happened. So the world accelerated in terms of digital exposure, but I think at the time it was still an evolving state. So yeah, and then of course after that time was over, I had another opportunity to pivot into a nonprofit, international nonprofit, and then I headed the global directorship of communications and partnerships, and it was around youth education, and loved the job, but and I was in the air most of the time, so that took me away from family. So decided that okay, I need to find a more anchored job. So I looked around, and I was in KL at the time, and I found this amazing place. Of course, this only came afterwards, but the whole idea of ASB and what the school stood for, and then the people and the amazing students, the faculty and staff, I think is what has kept me here. It's I think one of the longest serving jobs that I've had in my career, and there you go.
That's an impressive journey. And you mentioned the air, like you were so many times in the air.
Yeah.
And I did a little due diligence when you were serving in the forces.
Yeah.
You were in the Air Force.
Yeah.
So, how was the military life in the Air Force compared to the civilian life in the air?
So when I was serving my duty, I think, I mean, not because I was in the Air Force, but my job took me around a lot across the globe because I served the minister, defense minister. He had government business that he had to conduct, not just in Washington, but also in different parts of Southeast Asia, meeting with his counterparts. So it took me to Jakarta, to Singapore, to Hong Kong, and many other places. I think I had a very unique opportunity to also accompany him to Iraq twice through Kuwait, and it was just after the war had ended. So we had troops on the ground helping to rebuild and reconstruct the war-stricken areas. So it took me to areas that I would have never thought of going at the time at that age. And it was an eye-opener to see a part of the world that has been impacted by war. And I think coming from also a country that was going through war in the 50s and rebuilding and recovering, I've read about it, I've heard about it, but I've never actually seen it with my eyes until I went to Iraq. And that really was an awakening of how scary war can be. And right now I know the war is happening with Ukraine and Russia, and not only can I imagine, I can understand and I can fathom the difficulties and the challenges of that. So experience gives you the capacity to really have a deeper understanding and empathy and sympathy towards a lot of things, and that's why I value the experience a lot. But you talk about being in the air, so those were government business travels, and it was not easy. There's a lot of preparation. So I did the work on the protocol side as well. So learned a lot about government protocol or norms, and I think how things are done in that space. But that has been the foundation of sort of my discipline on conducting business, on relationship building, and I think that provided the leadership, I think, opportunities to also build on. So that continued with my journey in the corporate and nonprofit side of things. I think that was, there are many similarities, I would say, right? Because at the end of the day, it's about principle, it's about integrity, about how you conduct your work, and the relationships that are built around it are strong and last for a long time. And I think that's what keeps me on the toe all the time when I'm with people, when I'm doing something. I never take things for granted. I'm never complacent, or I try not to be at least. And that's turned out to be pretty rewarding. My job in the corporate side, again, going back to the air, being in the air, I think because of the nature of my work in business development, yes, I am here at a business school, but I do business development. It's all about trying to find opportunities and trying to connect the dots, and and the relationships that are formed in the process. So I love doing it, and I have to say that although it's sort of, I'm gonna hate myself for saying this later on probably, but I love dirty, messy, and complicated. I love to solve complicated issues and navigate through that terrain to find a way to resolve challenges that not many people can do. And the thrill, the excitement of being able to do that has always been my sort of force in driving myself to do things that many people don't like to do.
Yeah, that's very impressive because the similarities are very subtle. And I'm also happy to hear that there is always a volume of work before going to the air. It's not because somebody just jump in the air and then that's it.
Yeah.
There is preparation to make things happen. Now, there was a very singular moment that you mentioned at the beginning, that it was that after the military service, you went to the Kennedy School,
Right.
which is something that from a little afar it will be, wait a second, how are these two correlated? But when we began to do more analysis, it's actually kind of like a hidden practice. Like even in the business schools, we
Right.
see veterans actually doing that. So how was first that decision to say, I want to go this path? And second, why the Kennedy School?
So I think there were multiple factors contributing to my decision to apply and also to go. I think I mentioned earlier in our conversation that my trip to the Middle East at the time, to Iraq, influenced my thinking around what I want to do when I grow up. And I think at the time I wanted to create some opportunities for myself to explore ways to contribute to society. Because when I saw the war-stricken areas, especially the children in the post-war Iraq terrain, it was something that resonated with me a lot. And how can I help? Because I was always interested in youth education since I was, in college. I've been a part of Scouts, which is a non-formal education institution, and I've been a volunteer with many youth organizations. So, but it also was the fact that I wanted to have an impact, not just contribute. And how to go about that, I needed the space and the time and the people to interact with to have a better understanding. So for me, the Kennedy School, I think, was one of the schools that I considered to do that. And I was fortunate enough to be admitted, and I met some amazing people that I still, work and interact with today, as I do here at ASB, of course. But I think putting yourself in an environment where you're with like-minded people and are driven to, I think, achieve excellence as best as you can is as best as you can do to set yourself up for success. There are so many things you can do on your own as an individual, but I've always had the philosophy that if you can do this together in a collective manner, you can have such a wider and deeper impact than doing it by yourself. It's also about leadership, I think. Being around people that inspires you and that gives you the positive energy to move forward, despite whatever hurdles and challenges you may face, I think allows you to know that you have a community backing you up, and also gives you the confidence to exercise the leadership needed, because you know that there are people who are always supporting you and rooting for you, and that's important. So community is very important, and knowing that you can be a leader and a follower, both are leadership and followership are very important. So and you have to be not one or the other, but you have to be both, depending on the circumstances that you face. So the school taught me to be, a good leader as much as a good follower, so that I can contribute where and if needed. I love the fact that graduate school, especially professional graduate school, same as ASB, allows you the environment to hone in on a lot of things that you're interested in doing, but also to form a discipline and also to validate your principles. Because when you're in school, sometimes there's so much going on, right? As my mentor, and of course you know him too, Sean Ferguson, he used to mention the word PFOMO, right? Professional fear of missing out. So I know when I was in grad school, I was trying to attend as many seminars and talks and master classes as I could. But in the end, I think that was also part of my thinking in the fear of missing out. But I've come to a realization at some point in school that there's only so much you can do in a given time. So you have to be principled, you have to be focused, knowing what you want to get out of whatever decisions you make. So that's something that I learned in school. It took trial and error, but I would not have been able to realize that unless I actually had gone through that process. So a school enables you to do that, and that's the beauty of being in school, right? You're here to learn. If you came to school knowing everything, I mean, what's the use? So I think, and that's what I love about being here at ASB too, if I can just kind of fast forward my time, even though I'm not a student here, I get to be somewhat close to that. I'm always learning and contributing, and seeing students learn as well is also a privilege. So I get to be around that a little bit more. So
That's quite remarkable, because watching those little differences, but also the analogies and how it reflects and compounds later in life, is really something that people want to hear, because it's not very well discussed. Now, given the chance that you were there, that would be Boston, right? Or Cambridge?
Cambridge.
It's still Cambridge, right?
I lived in Boston, but it was in Cambridge.
Everybody lives in Boston, right? But given that time, it's really catching my attention that the public policy and the focus that you wanted to do was on peace development.
Yeah.
And not many people actually wants to hear that word peace, because it's like, let's be honest, it's easier to send people to war than to be patient and build in time of peace. So what peace brings to you as a concept or as a matter of life?
I think peace is being able to have a state of being where we can coexist. In my dictionary, there's never a absolute right or wrong. I think it's more about how we're able to, I think a little bit more than tolerate, how we're able to accept, respect. And once we have that, peace is something that comes automatically. You can't just put two people in a room or a collective entities and say you need to be peaceful with one another. It doesn't work like that. Everybody has their own different ways of doing things and different values, different mission, and different beliefs. And as long as we have our space and the feeling of safety, that I can have my own way of doing things without being dictated on otherwise, I think, they say treat each other as you would like to be treated. But also at the same time, you have to know how to treat others as they would like to be treated as well, right? So I think that has to apply equally in parallel. And that's the balancing act that's required to achieve peace. And not many think through this a lot because we're always insisting on what we think is right. And it's a shame. But at the end of the day, we're also only but humans. So the more people are aware of that, and I think self-awareness and that mindset is key in achieving peace. Because if you're aware of what other people will feel or are impacted, then you get to think about twice about what you would want to do, right? So that's peace for you.
It's true, a very insightful concept that has a lot of value when it's practiced. You were walking in the streets of Cambridge, and then all of a sudden, the time comes to a moment to say it's time to do a different thing. It's time to go to the next chapter.
Right.
So what happened after that time in the Kennedy School, and what made you say, yeah, let's go there?
So I think I don't want to sound too philosophical, but in life there are moments where you know that this is something that you want to pursue, or this is something that you want to put your time and energy into. Around the end of my first semester, I was more focused on international security, peacekeeping operations, all that, the political science area. But I think at some point I met interesting colleagues and classmates who were focused on sustainability, on CSR. And that opened really a different area of interest for me because I found out there are ways to use, I think, private sector resources to generate public value. And it all started with a class called Public-Private Partnerships. And of course, it was mainly around infrastructure, but to get into a successful way of going into public-private partnerships, it was, as I mentioned earlier, it was dirty, messy, and complicated as always. So, but the way you're able to navigate through that to successfully reach that goal of generating both public and private value, I think that's what caught my attention. Because most students who come to the Kennedy School are more about public value generation, right? And those who go to business school are about private value generation, right? Profit, revenue. But in the end, the fundamentals are the same. It's about value generation, right? Whether it's public or private. So we learn a lot of things that are taught in the business school and vice versa, only the target is a bit different. But the fundamentals are the same. The tools we use are very much alike. Right? Public administration, business administration, innovation in both areas. They're all, very much similar in the principles that we take the approach. Risk management, valuation, all of that we do at the Kennedy School as well. And of course, the focus is on public value, on development and things like that. But at the end, how we go about it, the tools we use are the same or similar. So it got me thinking about how those areas can synergize. And finding synergy is never easy, right? In both work and people, right? But, and that's what I loved about it. So I said, hey, why not focus on both areas? So I changed my concentration to business government policy. And at the same time, I was also looking at, we have a concentration at the Kennedy called leadership advocacy. So I love to advocate leaders. I mean, when I was working with the minister, it also kind of came to a realization that it's not that I wanted to be a follower, but if I was going to be a follower in whatever role I played, I wanted to be a great follower. So I'm a student of leadership, but I'm also a student of followership. So for me, I think that's what the Kennedy School allowed me to discover and explore about myself. And I have to say that, the principles and the disciplines formed during those 2 years at school still remain, I think, core to my values and the way that I conduct my work.
Yeah, those are beautiful words, are even more beautiful when they're practiced. Especially because, let's be honest, it's not about taking in life, it's about helping build others. Because those others will build more people and so forth. That compounded effect is a way also to create everlasting peace.
Yeah.
And You also mentioned about certain ventures that you did after, like going into the finance or
Right.
corporate responsibility, and because those are more profit driven,
Right.
there would be some conflicts. So, how did you stand with your principles when those conflicts are arising?
I think narrative is key. When you look at, like you said, a particular endeavor that you would pursue from a company's point of view, how can you persuade um, the internal stakeholders that this is good for business, but also at the same time that it would be good for public? I think it comes down to public confidence and trust. And it applies to anywhere. It could be profit, it could be non-profit. Those are universal values that no one can deny. Because let's say for profit or private sector, when you're looking at a CSR or a sustainability initiative, and now I mean more than ever, I mean the word ESG has, the abbreviation ESG has come out, and it's pretty much everywhere now. But during my time in the early days of when this was evolving, people were asking, okay, what's in it for us? Why are we doing this community project? Why are we, going green? Or why are we trying to change the governance? Um, I think there was a lot of educating the market that had taken place at the time. You could bring in Porter's Five Forces and explain how this aligns with sustainability. And it's not just about saving the planet or planting trees. It's also about the company's business reputation. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that trust and confidence of consumers or clients, they will leave you. And we have words like SRI now, right? Socially responsible investment, and that's also a reflection of the times. People will only invest in businesses that are conducting themselves in a sustainable manner. That didn't exist 50, 60 years ago, but now it's stronger than ever and it's still growing. You have indices like DJSI, Dow Jones Sustainability Indexes, or FTSE for Good, that affect how the market is seeing or perceiving each business or entity. And it speaks to where we are now. And we're more than ever, I mean, COP28 is happening very soon in Dubai. And more will be discussed on how we move forward as a species, as a world. But I think that's sort of where we are in terms of trying to make that sell is much more easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier in terms of having people understand why sustainability is important, why it's not just about making a buck, but how we make a buck is also going to dictate on how long your business will be up and running and how much money you're going to make. So it all aligns. At the end of the day, sustainability has always existed. It's just becoming a term that people are more self-conscious of. But I think the long-lasting businesses of the world that are over 50 to 100 years old, you could see that there are things that they put into place that are already what we consider sustainable practices, right? So when you think about it, it's always been there for the ones who have done it right. So doing good and I think not just for profit but also for society, it pays off. So
That's quite a giveaway that you're giving us right now because it's like so much information and we need to know how to process it by chunks because if we want to process everything, it will be too hard. Now, there are contrarians that say that nowadays sustainability is a fancy way to greenwash. Which are your words about that?
I mean, it's always going to be in the eye of the beholder, right? We're always going to find fault in something, and it's a judgment call of how you want to interpret it. But yes, to some extent, many companies in the past have had, I would say, ill intentions of trying to use initiatives as a way of greenwashing themselves. I think consumers or clients or users of the world are actually more smart and more, I think, uh, aware of what greenwashing is. So, and there are now more than ever, I think, mechanics in place to kind of filter that. It's becoming harder and harder to greenwash, um, or blue wash, like saying, "Oh, we're doing this with the UN," or
Oh, that's
yeah,
another one.
yeah, greenwashing, blue washing. So the fact that these terms have come out is also a reflection of the fact that people are more aware of this and conscious. So be careful of what you're trying to do. If you're trying to greenwash, people will know. And as the saying goes, what goes around comes around. If you're setting yourself up for failure if you do that, because scrutiny and I think the the consensus around is that they're not going to leave you alone. They will make sure that this is cleared. So
Yeah, it's very particular in this day and age to do the due diligence, because otherwise, how can we ever know? At the beginning, you also mentioned that you were walking in the city of Kuala Lumpur, and then you realized that this is a beautiful building. What are they doing there?
okay.
So, besides the building, what else tells you? Let's explore the next venture here.
Right. So when I started my work at ASB 6 years ago, it wasn't in this building because they were still building it. But we were just across the street in Sasana, Kijang, another facility by the Central Bank of Malaysia. And we were very excited and hopeful. But the whole idea of ASB, I think, came about even before this building was built, of what we stood for, the mission of the school to contribute to the emerging market. I think that really was sold by, by many amazing, staff and faculty, and of course students and now alums. We all came together here with an understanding that this is what this institution is about. But now, when this building came up, and it's pretty much a landmark here in KL. I mean, look at the architecture; it's amazing, right? When I go abroad and show pictures of this to my colleagues or around the world, they're amazed of the level of grandeur and sophistication this facility has. And I think we have a very unique opportunity to not just the facade of things, but literally the functions and the space this amazing facility provides and offers is allowing people to come together and exchange, innovative ideas and practices. And you don't really get that as much as you think that this could be in any place. People will want to come here. You have to have people want to come to somewhere to get together. It's more of I think it's becoming more and more of a symbol of, I think, knowledge leadership for people in all sort of walks of life to come and share their stories. We're having so many events these days, especially now under the leadership of Sanjay Sharma, our new dean. He's put in some great initiatives with CEO fireside chats, a lot of, I think, events that we've sort of built around the school's facilities, and it's a very multi-purpose facility. So we make sure that those purposes are met. And I see more and more people coming in as the years have passed. I think we did a soft launch opening here in the school in 2020, just after COVID started. So I think we've come a long way in the past 2.5 years to get to where we are now. So I'm really excited and happy to see ASB thrive and grow, especially the traffic that's coming in. It's been growing a lot. So looking forward to seeing more of that grow.
And the opportunity to only walk from the Sasana to the academic building is something that is not very well discussed, because when you got opportunity, for people who is familiar in the KL Central or the KL area, everybody knows where Sasana is. But the academic building, you only have to walk like maybe 600 meters or less, and you have in between two gardens
Right.
that are like, okay, hidden gems of the architecture, let alone when you have the chance to go to the rooftop or see the secret garden or the
Yeah,
Twin Towers. It's something that makes you value, like, it's good to be here.
absolutely.
You also mentioned that discipline comes from different angles.
Hmm.
And I remember that you have been also a student of a martial art and a practicer of a martial art called Taekwondo.
Yeah.
So, what made you start in Taekwondo?
Oh, so it's a bit of a stereotype, but not all Koreans know how to do Taekwondo,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I grew up in Korea, and I took up Taekwondo as a practice. My mother had sent me to a dojang, which is the equivalent of dojo in Japanese,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the Korean Taekwondo dojangs used to be sort of every block they would have a Taekwondo dojang. That's how popular it was amongst primary and secondary school students. It's a great way for parents to kind of send their kids off and not be at home. But I loved it, but I continued until I was in high school. But I never really got into the sport until recently. Full disclosure, during COVID, um, my kid was doing Taekwondo, my son Daniel, and he actually was saying, Dad, do you have a Taekwondo club in ASB? And it got me thinking because, we were just kind of easing from the lockdowns and students were, stuffed in their dorms and just really stressed and they needed to vent here and there. So I spoke with Jeffrey, our admissions director, and Jules to look at ways to help students sort of relieve that stress. And the idea came about from my son, but it grew and idea became reality. The school supported the idea, and we started the Taekwondo club here. And I also got into exercising more because we've been in a pandemic lockdown for 2 years. And I was a black belt, a first degree Dan, first Dan black belt at the time, but after 2 years, I became a second degree or second Dan black belt in the process, and we've also had many students graduate with black belts. So we used to joke, oh, get an MBA at ASB and also get a black belt while you're at it, and it actually came true. So really proud of the students who've gone above and beyond, you know, their studies and other more important stuff to keep that. But I think what I love about the martial art, and it's not just Taekwondo. It could be karate, it could be judo, it could be kendo, or jujitsu, whatever. But it gives you an opportunity to um, form the discipline that's needed to continuously commit yourself to a goal. And I think that mindset allows you to apply it to other things, such as academics or career development or relationships, communities, and it becomes a foundation. So it's not just, and of course, you get to exercise and keep yourself fit and healthy. Um, I think it comes together.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end, of course, you look great when you're wearing a Dong-Wook, a uniform with a black belt around your waist. But it's also about showing that you are held accountable for those principles as well. Because with, I think, status, as you go up the ranks in Taekwondo, your responsibilities also increase. And also, it's a learning process too. And what I love about the sport or the martial art is um, the humility that you have to take on and learn as you increase your I think seniority in the class. Uh, it's not to show off. It's to share. It's to learn together, and also to teach along the way what you've learned. So I think that's what Taekwondo is about for me. It's about the discipline, it's about the humility, it's about the principle, and also it's about the community. When you're sweating, I mean, you're an athlete yourself too, but when you're sweating and you're working out after a great workout, people open up to one another more. And that's what I love about, it doesn't have to be Taekwondo, it can be any other sport, but, when you're with someone kicking a ball or anything like that, or kicking a mat, I think you're able to get closer to one another. And that's the beauty of it.
Exactly. Is the beauty of the martial art? The practice of the martial art is also the practice of discipline that I have seen also translated in places like business. I got a chance to also be in podcasts with other people that are black belt in judo, or the famous podcasters like Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman who are black belts in jiu-jitsu, and they also say the same. It's about the discipline. It's not about showing off. It's about, can you be accountable with your own principles, and can you stand with those, and when to act when it's necessary, like
Yeah.
that kind of thing. That you please correct me. Please correct me on this. I dare to say that not even in the military life you can see that. Because how many times we've seen people who have retired and they don't discipline physically
Right.
throughout the years, but the ones who practice martial arts, they value that thing. Like, okay, I need to be ready, I need to remain accountable. So I've seen that personally.
It keeps you on your toes for sure, because I think in Taekwondo at least, and with respect to other martial arts, I think the more you know and the more you grow, the more you realize you don't know. And there's so much more that you have to learn. And I think that's what um, discipline is about, because discipline will help you move forward and be patient about things that you would not be otherwise. But also, it's about the humility that you gain from it, knowing that there's more to learn. There's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be someone smarter than you. And there's always going to be more people that you can learn from to grow. So I think that's the thinking that I've gained over the years through the martial art. And I think a lot of students who have worked with me and trained also have come to realize that. And I would say most, if not all, of the ASB's Taekwondo Club members, we like to have fun too, right? But at the same time, that learning experience is what we value, I think.
Given that you've been in different places and different regions, I need to ask you this.
Sure.
Which have been the little differences you have seen across those places?
Um, I mean, in terms of culture, there will always be different cultures. So it'll take me another hour to talk about that. But I think when you think about going to different places, um, it's it's something that we, as human beings, are inclined to look for something familiar to identify with. Um, but I think my ask to people is that do something that is absolutely foreign to you. Absolutely, I mean, as long as it's not dangerous, right? But do something that will kind of make yourself less comfortable. And next time you're there again, or you meet someone from there, you can talk about it, and actually you'll find yourself more comfortable doing that again. And it also, that helps make the connections. And in business development, as you mentioned earlier, it's all about finding a common ground to relate and to connect and find synergies. And the only way to do that is to make sure that you make the other side comfortable with you. Right? And they'll do their efforts to do the same. But if you can find two individuals or two entities trying to be hospitable with one another's needs and circumstances, I think that's where tremendous, I think, synergies are identified and generated. So that's when I'm always traveling, I always look for ways to, like for instance, when I first came to Malaysia, I was not a big fan of durian, but I can't live without durians now.
Okay.
But because my first experience was horrible, I think I had the wrong one. But be open about things and don't make judgments from the very beginning, because sometimes you have stereotypes or sometimes you hear things from others. But the truth is never with what you hear from others. The truth is always about what you judge it to be or deem it to be after multiple attempts. I invite people to not do it once, not twice, but multiple times, before making a judgment on something, especially something that's foreign or alien to them. Um, because sometimes people experience things and you don't want to generalize that. But we have a tendency to do that, especially in this very fast-paced, fast-moving world we live in. You depend on YouTube, you depend on what you Google up on this and search. But just, I think a word of advice would be to give it a try on, for yourself, and not once, not twice, but a couple of times before you make the judgment. And that helps a lot because it gives you a perspective in ways that other people may not have found otherwise.
That's something that really encourages people to expand their comfort zone. Even I remember a quote about different places, comfort zones, and it's like why people have accents. Well, accent is a way to actually tell you how far they are from their comfort zone, and
Exactly.
it's truly something. Now, given that you have been practicing Taekwondo and just been expanding the comfort zone many times, I remember that during the time in ASB that we have been together, you also encourage people, hey, let's do this walking things.
Yes,
So,
CDO on foot.
so tell us about that because
Um,
it's not the normal business setting that we are in AC just discussing. You are in the nature. So
Right.
how is that?
So CDO on foot, for the viewers here, CDO stands for Career Development Office, which is where I work at. So we usually, as you know, Fabian, our advisory or coaching sessions happen indoors in my office or maybe a counseling room or coach room. I came to thinking, I usually do a lot of walks around this area, especially in our jungle roads. And you were in the tropics, right? Why not take advantage of it? And, it was by coincidence. I started out with an idea of having a walk with a student because I needed to take my walk. It was a Sunday or a Saturday morning, if I recall. And the student really had to talk to me about something urgently. He says, "Do you want to walk with me?" And we did it, and it was actually an amazing opportunity to really hear what the students' concerns were and their challenges. And it got me thinking, why not do this in either individual or group settings? So, and we do a lot of group coaching here at ASB, as you know. And there are different forms to do it. We can do the tea ceremony coaching, we can do other stuff. But I think for me, what worked was walking. And I think Sanjay also validated that walking helps stimulate the brains, and there's a study on this. So it's actually a scientific approach too, right? Which was great to hear. And I think over the 2 years I've done the CDO on foot. I don't do it very often, but I do it as much as I can. And the outcome has always been great, if I may say so. Because, like I said, when students are out in nature, they're walking, they're stimulated, they're not so rigid, sitting down in a room, closed doors with air conditioning. It's very different atmosphere and energy. And I want to bring out as much as positive energy as possible, because when you're thinking in a positive way or when you have positive energy, there are things that you see, again, in different perspectives that you would not have otherwise. And sometimes that brings about a solution that was right there in front of you, but you just didn't realize. And that's what coaching is about. It's to help bring an environment, a safe space, a way for students to realize and build that awareness. So we do what we can to help raise awareness, to open more wider perspectives, and be able to find a solution.
Yeah, it's something that it should be more and more practiced, and also the specificity of this location, because you literally are like less than 3 minutes away to walking distance, the jungle part. You feel the humidity and the tropic environment, which is, let's say, if you're working in Cambridge in February, it's going to be very chilly. You will see the Charles River full of ice. Or let's say you are in Dubai and everything is dry.
Right.
It's a function of the nature. Now, let me ask you a controversial question.
Okay.
Just been in Dubai and just been in Singapore. People say this place is hotter than the other. Which is place hotter for you?
It depends because some parts of the years in Dubai are actually much more cooler. Like between, I would say, mid-November to early April, I mean, it's very cool and nice and dry. Whereas the rest of the year in Dubai or the UAE or the region, in the Gulf region, it will be very humid and hot. So, like almost like a sauna. So I dare not, go outside for too long during those periods when I'm visiting. Singapore, I lived there for 2 years before coming to Malaysia. I mean, it's an island surrounded by lots of bodies of water, and it's tropics. It's literally on the equator. So we can say definitely all year round, there's a certain level of humidity that you have to cope with. But when you compare with Dubai, let's say if I were given a choice to stay in Singapore versus Dubai in the month of July, I would choose Singapore over Dubai. But if it was during the, I don't know, somewhere in January, February, I would choose Dubai for sure over Singapore. So even though so it's all about, I think, the understanding of climates. Um, and sometimes we try to overgeneralize by thinking of Dubai as a desert, hot area, but when it's actually not always the case. Whereas Singapore, you have, times when it's dry, when it's more wet, and of course, you have to think about the different times. It's, yeah, it's
That's
different.
a very nice disclosure because it's like think about the times. Otherwise, you have to face the consequences.
Exactly.
That's true. Now, talking about things that have been happening in the past and things that are happening right now towards the future, I need to ask about your decisions. And I need to ask you, across your journey, which was the most challenging compromise you did, and why was that?
Hmm. Interesting question. Um, I think it's always, I wouldn't say challenging because I knew what the answers were. It's always been a balance of work and family for me. Of course, family comes first, but you also have to make sure that you have work. So I gotta, bring the bread home. And I think for me, that balance has always been something that I've been working progress because my work takes me around the world a lot, for better or for worse. But at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm there for my family when I'm needed, but even when I'm not needed, just to know that I'm there. And I have a relatively young family. So two teenage girls right now and an 8-year-old boy. And of course, those are things that sometimes you can't buy with money. Time and the quality spent with the people that you love. And of course, equally the same, time, there is, the opportunities that come and go in your professional career. So I think for me, trying to anticipate, identify the opportunities in the right time, in the right moment, is where I need to find ways to make a choice. I wouldn't use the word compromise, but rather a choice, a deliberate and a conscious choice of what's more important to me. I think is where I'm always trying to do a balancing act. Um, I would say, other than that, uh, is probably knowing that there's always going to be an opportunity cost, right, in economic terms in life. Knowing what's more important to you, because both of them may be equally important, but what is something that you won't gain again? What is something that you can't do again, right? Or you can't turn back time. So unless the day comes when we are able to do that, or when you have a clone to do both things at the same time, you have to make a choice. So, and that's life. And for me, I think it's always that moment that of choice, or knowing that I'm giving up one thing for another, that I know there's no regrets. As long as I have no regrets, then
That's a very
Yeah.
peaceful way to hear and also encourage a lot of people to practice.
Yeah.
Now, given that we've been discussing a lot, there are going to be a lot of people watching this. Across there, there's going
I
to be
hope so.
very young people watching this, some of them
Right.
young DWs watching this as well. So I need to ask you, what piece of advice will you give to your younger self?
Mm, I like to do a lot of things. Not because I'm smarter than other people, not because I'm ambitious than other people, but I think because of curiosity. But sometimes curiosity can get you into trouble because you have a lot of options to think about. For me, when I was, let's say, 20 years back, um, when I was in, I would say, college, I would say that I was a reporter for the university press. So I had an opportunity to expose myself to a lot of interesting individuals for interviews, an article, things like that. But I think that got me around to meeting a lot of people. But I could have done more, I think. Uh, and a little more in the sense that not spread myself too wide or too thin to meeting as many different people as I could, but I think for me to be a little more focused and honed in on areas that were strategically advantageous in moving forward. So if I had done that, I think I would have had a much stronger foundation to get to my next steps. So that's something I look back that I could have done better. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword for anything, right? Because I was able to meet a diverse array, a spectrum of people, and get to know a lot of different areas. I think that got me to think about what I wanted to do later on, and knowing what's on the other side allowed me to make the decisions faster. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm a bit contradicting myself by saying both. It's a double-edged sword, like I said.
W, that's a very nice way to end the episode. Thank you very much
Thank you
for your
so much,
time.
Fabian.
How people can find you?
I'll be at the CDO office. You got my emails, or you can find me on LinkedIn. Or go through you.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye. And that's it.